Dawn vista of a lake with pine forest and snow-capped mountains in the background, followed by a bird of prey gnawing on a carcass. A person hitting a tambourine-sized drum. Expanding circles with a buffalo silhouette graphic in the center, followed by the course title graphic, and a list of the 5 episodes over an image of Southwest Red Rock, and a graphic for episode 3 that pops up.
Welcome back to Understanding Tribal Treaties and Reserved Rights. In our previous episode, The Unique Status of Tribal Nations, we explored the rich tapestry of tribal sovereignty. In Treaties, the supreme law of the land, we dove into the historical significance of tribal treaties. In today's episode, Beyond the Paper, the power of reserved rights, we'll unravel the concept of reserved rights.
Turquoise and tan text on black background matching the voice-over, followed by an ocean scene and small interview videos appearing in front and scrolling upward.
By the end of this episode, you will be able to explain reserved rights and their role in safeguarding tribal resources and cultural heritage. As a reminder, we are grateful to the tribal leaders who have joined us to share their own and their tribe's experiences and views. And note that these tribal leaders are speaking as representatives of their sovereign nations and not providing the views or opinions of the federal government.
A black and white photo and an old document with a title reading, Lenape of Delaware Treaty of Fort Pitt. Turquoise text on black background highlighting key terms, and then a black and white sketch of council at Medicine Lodge Creek, showing natives and meeting with settlers, followed by turquoise and tan text over black, matching voice-over.
In Episode 2, we discussed that from 1778 to 1871, the United States relations with American Indian tribes were defined and conducted largely through treaty making and the implementation of those treaties. Through these treaties, Indian tribes ceded or relinquished land, resources, and other rights or interests to the United States in exchange for certain rights, land, payment, goods, and services.
An image of treaties and old documents, and then turquoise and tan text over black, matching voice-over. Then a painting covered by images of 2 treaties.
The terms of these exchanges were laid out in the treaty, but as we'll talk about in this episode, the rights that some tribes kept or were given include more than is apparent in just the written words of a treaty. Sometimes we have to look at what was not said to fully understand the rights that tribes hold under their treaties, what was reserved by the tribes.
Turquoise text on black background highlighting key terms, with a snow-kissed American Southwest vista in between words.
So what exactly are reserved rights, and why do they matter? Reserved rights can include implied rights that were retained by or reserved for tribes. The key word to remember here is implied.
Drawing of a beaver hunt and its cabin from 1703, followed by turquoise text on black background, highlighting key terms. Then a light blue waterfall and red rocks.
These are rights not specifically mentioned in the text of the treaty, statute, or other document. They are rights found in the overall context of the document, which are understood in light of the history and circumstances surrounding the document.
Black and white photo of a noble buck in peril from a Sioux hunter 1908, followed by turquoise text on black background, highlighting key terms.
And the background legal principles. Reserved rights are not limited to treaties and can arise based on a statute, executive order, or other law.
Interview subject is a man in a suit with a native beaded medallion around his neck, and his name on screen reads, Leonard Finday, Secretary/Treasurer, Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe.
But they said, in this territory we're ceding, we're going to maintain the right to hunt, fish, and gather. And so to this day, they are able to exercise those rights. And a lot of people feel that those rights are special rights or rights that have been granted to the indigenous people by the federal government. And some misinformed people even feel they're granted by the state government. But that's simply not the case. And that's something that I would hope that all federal employees know and realize, is that when we're talking about treaty rights, we're talking about rights that are inherent as the indigenous people of this continent that had those rights that they were exercising prior to European contact.
A running stream cuts through a snowscape wilderness, and then turquoise text on black background highlighting key terms. Then an image of the U.S. Supreme Court justices in 1899.
Reserved rights can include implied rights, but that does not make them any less binding or enforceable. Implied rights are just as important as express ones.
Turquoise text on black background highlighting key terms, and then an old drawing of a fish wheel in the Columbia River, followed by more turquoise text on black background highlighting key terms.
The Supreme Court first recognized reserved rights in United States v. Winans, a case in which a private company had blocked a tribe's access to its traditional fishing grounds. The Treaty of Yakima in 1855 provided for the tribe.
The Treaty of Yakima under black text on tan background that matches the voiceover. Then a 1924 black and white photo of a native spearfishing for salmon, and then recent color photos of the same, with black text on tan background that matches the voiceover.
The right of taking fish at all usual and accustomed fishing places. The Supreme Court interpreted the expression, right of taking fish, to mean that because the tribe had an express right to fish at their traditional fishing grounds, it must also have an implied right to access those fishing grounds, even across privately owned land. Though the treaty did not expressly address access,
Stock underwater footage of lake or stream fish with black text on tan background that matches the voiceover. Then a contemporary photo of a native girl throwing a spear in Great Sand Dunes National Park.
history showed that the tribe had enjoyed access to the fishing grounds at the time it entered into the treaty. The Winans decision has been quoted in many court opinions since. In it, the court explains that treaties are not a grant of rights to the Indians, but a grant of rights from them, reservation of those not granted. In other words, tribal rights that were not expressly granted to the United States at the time of the treaty could have been retained by the tribe.
Turquoise text on black background highlighting key terms, followed by a black and white photo entitled Indians Fishing for Salmon in Oregon in 1941. Then a photo of the Milk River running through the Fort Belknap Indian Reservation.
This is known as the implied reserved rights doctrine. It's important to know that the implied reserved rights doctrine extends beyond pre-existing rights and recognizes that treaties, statutes, executive orders, or other formal documents also implicitly establish new rights as necessary to carry out the purposes of the legal document.
Turquoise text on black background highlighting key terms, followed by stream water in between the text images, and then a different stream and a graphic quoting the Supreme Court text in voiceover.
In Winters v. United States, another foundational reserved rights case, the Supreme Court held that a right to water was implied to be reserved in an 1888 agreement establishing the reservation as a permanent home for several tribes. An issue in the case were the upstream irrigation works of non-Indian farmers, which had prevented the downstream flow of water to tribes on the Fort Belknap Reservation.
While the 1888 agreement establishing the reservation didn't explicitly mention water, the Supreme Court held that an implied right existed based on the reason for which the reservation was established, that is, to provide a permanent homeland for tribes and to promote the development of agriculture.
Sepia photo of natives at Fort Belknap Reservation, Montana in 1906, followed by a modern photo of Milk River in Canada and Montana. Then turquoise text on black background highlighting key terms and a photo of a judge's gavel with a federal law book.
The reservation's land, which the court found was arid, would have been practically useless for agriculture without water. For that reason, the court recognized the agreement established an implied right to water as necessary to fulfill the purposes of establishing the reservation. The rights addressed in Winters, reserved water rights, now also called Winters rights,